Welcome to the NextGen Environmental Firm, the podcast where we speak with leaders building the future of environmental and sustainability-driven businesses. Today, I'm speaking with Jeff Bonar and Sally Hart from CapCO2 Solutions. Jeff and Sally, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you.
What I find really interesting about CapCO2 is that this is not just a carbon story. It's also a story about ethanol plants, farmers, rural communities, and the next generation of biofuels. In simple terms, ethanol is a renewable fuel usually made from corn in USA, and it is blended into gasoline. Because ethanol plants buy corn from farmers, they are closely tied up to rural economies. During fermentation, ethanol plants also produces CO2. What makes CapCO2 interesting is that they are looking at the CO2 not just as an emission, but as something that can be turned into a new product, recycled carbon e-methanol, and potentially a new revenue stream. So today we'll talk about how ethanol plants could become platforms for new products, new markets, and rural economic growth. So Jeff, how did you personally got involved in this work, and what led you to CapCO2 Solutions?
Very good. So, well, here's the way I really got started is my adult children told me that boomers need to do something about the climate and to quit wasting my time in software and focus on something that will really make a difference. So I took that seriously and I was exploring what are the options where I could make an impact. And I got fascinated with biogenic CO2. So let me explain what that is and why it's such an interesting opportunity. So biogenic CO2 is from plants that captured it within the last year. So when you take a corn plant and you harvest the corn and the rest of the plant rots, the CO2 goes back in the atmosphere and it's net zero because it was just captured last year and it was just returned with, 12 months later or 6 months later or whatever. The difference with conventional fossil fuels is the CO2 was captured 100 million years ago. And when you burn the fuel, that CO2 goes up in the atmosphere and it adds to the CO2 in the atmosphere. It's not just part of the natural carbon cycle. It's like you're juicing up the carbon cycle to an extreme. So there's like a freebie there. If we take that biogenic CO2 and make something useful out of it, even if it's a fuel, and then you burn that fuel, well, you just leveraged the carbon cycle. You didn't add new CO2 to the system. So I thought, oh, that's cool. That's a good idea. And then where do you get a lot of biogenic CO2? And it turns out the mother lode of biogenic CO2 are ethanol plants, because you're essentially fermenting the plant product, making it into alcohol. And when you make alcohol, you emit a lot of CO2. But it is biogenic and it's perfect opportunity to leverage that biogenic CO2 because you're already at a place that's really smart about handling fuels. So let's make a new fuel with that CO2. And that was the kind of start of the actual focus on this product.
When you start up this company?
Started up in 2023.
Oh, so it's very recent. Very recent.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And what it's kind of driving this, what you see, what started in 2023, what you're seeing now, and what future looks like.
Well, it was a pretty foreign idea to the industry. And to be fair, I was pretty foreign to the industry. Like, who the hell is this guy? And Sally has been instrumental in, okay, well, how do you actually talk to farmers in the Midwest and the kind of people who manage ethanol plants and what are their concerns? And um, we definitely have big plans for their CO2, but it's got to kind of fit into the worldview and deliver value in that world. So we've been evolving that while we continue to refine and get the technology ready to be delivered.
So, Sally, how did you come into the story from the communication and outreach side?
Yeah, I have a background in broadcast journalism in the radio side of things and local government as well. And one of my former mentors had connected me with Jeff, and the opportunity for CO2 to be put to work was really intriguing. And I was able to join the team, and I've been working with CapCO2 for about 3 years now. And just knowing that farmers try to use everything they have as a resource and seeing this as adding one more resource to that cycle.
So, before we get to technical, I want to keep this simple for listeners. For some outside of the industry, what problem CapCO2 really trying to solve?
Very good. It's pretty simple. People are looking for alternatives to fossil fuels um, for the climate reasons, something that doesn't emit CO2 that's 100 million years old. And also, current geopolitics, the war in Iran has made, countries like Japan, they don't have their own fossil fuel. And they're very, very vulnerable. And their executives, when I talk to shipping industry executives from Japan or Europe or Korea or Singapore, they're like, we need an alternative, and the sooner the better. And it's got to be cost competitive, but also something that, yeah, they just need an alternative. It's that simple. And so there's the initial market that we're focused on is in particular shipping fuel. There's lots of other uses for methanol, um, plastics, race car fuel, Formula One and sprint car racers use methanol. But the really big market opportunity is the big cargo ships that just can't, they got to run on something like some kind of fuel. And we give them that option.
Oh, that's excellent. That definitely needed, especially as you mentioned what's happening right now. So, how does CapCO2 solution work in simple terms?
Yeah. So basically, it's really simple. It's not complicated. You mix CO2, which we're getting from the ethanol plant, with hydrogen, which we make ourselves. We don't even have to go into all the details, but you can make hydrogen from water, and we mix them under some heat and pressure, and you get methanol out the other end. And uh, we have a patented process pioneered by Max Lebowski that does that very cost effectively and very compactly. In particular, conventional methanol plants look like a big oil refinery because they have to recycle everything 8 times. So to get
Oh,
all the methanol out, you have to run the CO2 and the raw materials you have to run through over and over again 8 times to get all the methanol out. We do it in one pass. So it makes the equipment smaller, simpler, cheaper.
great. So, what excites you the most at your work and with CapCO2?
Well, for me, it's getting to work with all the different people I get to work with that, um, you know, uh, the farmers that deliver the corn, the people that run the ethanol plants that have been refining. Uh, Here's something people don't know, and they should. Ethanol plants are producing a valuable product using biological organisms, and they're doing it at the scale of 100 million gallons a year and more. And there's nothing else in the world like that. It's just, there's all kinds of work on biomanufacturing and things like that, but they're not operating at 200 plants, on average 100 million gallons a year. So there's this huge expertise, huge kind of setup. And okay, well, ethanol's a good product. What about that CO₂ and making a new product? Leveraging everything that an ethanol plant is good at, loading fuel, shipping fuel, managing a production process that involves biology. We can leverage all that and build on it to create a new product and new revenues. And yeah.
I would echo that. I would also say that I really enjoy working with the other, team members at CapCO2. Jeff's assembled quite the crew with a variety of expertise, and it's been great to see CapCO2 grow. And I'm excited to see what happens in the future.
Yeah, me too. Because this is really interesting. So like CO₂ is getting a second career in the world, right? Instead of
Yeah,
being villain, now it is good boy. um,
exactly. Exactly. This biogenic CO₂, it's a good boy for sure.
so Sally, from a communication perspective, what part of the CapCO2 story do people understand quickly, and what part usually needs more explanation?
Just really emphasizing the CO2 utilization is as attractive as it can be. It has been something that it takes a moment sometimes, depending on what their background is. But it's also the thing that people really latch onto is that we can put that CO2 to work to become another, stream and another material. So having that opportunity for methanol, and then, ethanol was such a pioneering industry in the Midwest, and this is giving it another option to be a pioneer. So while they make the ethanol that they are experts in producing, they can now add e-methanol to their resume and be making that on site.
Now, so CapCO2 talks about as well modular on-site technology. For people who are not engineers, I think that's important point. And why does modular on-site technology matters for the ethanol plants?
You bring a couple of shipping crates packed full with equipment, you hook them up to electricity and pipes, and you now have a methanol plant. It's not a multi-year chemical plant construction project. It's, once we get it all polished and refined, we're talking a couple of months to have a whole new capability alongside of the ethanol plant.
Oh, wow, just 2 months.
That's where we want to get. The first one won't be that, but again, if you can manufacture the modules somewhere, truck them on site, hook them up, that's the ideal business model. That just makes, yeah, yeah. You don't want to have to hand construct the chemical processes. You want to deliver them working, and then you just hook them up to the sources of power and CO₂.
To build on that, we want to be good neighbors to the agricultural communities that surround these ethanol plants, and doing so, in a modular fashion doesn't infringe on any surrounding field work, whether that's row crops or pasture land.
So you mentioned that the primary is ethanol plants and capturing CO₂, and you mentioned that there's other opportunities for CO₂ and with new technology. Could you expand a bit more? So, for example, where you see CapCO2 expanding more and later within, let's say, 5 years, 10 years?
Sure. Well, the great future fuel in the sky is literally in the sky. It's sustainable aviation fuel, and it makes shipping fuel look small. There's a lot of need for sustainable aviation fuel, and it's really expensive. I mean, they can make sustainable aviation fuel now if you're willing to pay 10 or 20 times the cost of fossil aviation fuel. The pathway we're building is designed to make that cost effective. I'm not saying we're going to completely compete with fossil, but we'll come close. And e-methanol is a starting point, and all the processes we use, all the ability to capture waste CO2, that all can be leveraged to produce sustainable aviation fuel. And over time, that'll become our focus. So that's the big giant future that I can easily imagine 20 years from now that most ethanol plants are really SAF plants, and not just ethanol and methanol, but SAF as well.
Could you explain this more about? Can you expand a bit more about that?
So yeah, when you make SAF, I'm going to give a very non-technical explanation because this is not my area of expertise.
That's
But
brilliant. Yes, the simple one, please.
when you make SAF, you start with a base fuel. Ethanol and methanol are two of the most commonly mentioned. And maybe even you mix them together because there's some advantages to mixing them. And then you do some things to juice it up. And I'm not going to try and get more technical than that, but you have to add more energy per, volume of fuel. And there are standard chemical ways to do that. And competing technologies out there. And at some point we want to work with those technologies, but we'll provide the methanol, we'll provide the low carbon ethanol because we're making it low carbon. And then we'll partner with one of those SAF technologies and we'll produce SAF. And it'll be sort of the next module you add to the ethanol plant.
Oh, wow. Wow. And this is you talking about like more like 5 years to 10, right? Or
Yes.
so every next generation company has a exciting side and the difficult side. So what has been one of the hardest parts of the building the company and scaling?
Well, I would say two. One is with recent political changes, money to build first of a kind green fuel plants is not as abundant as it once was. So we have to kind of find the right business case and talk more carefully with people, which is fine. That's part of the job, but that's definitely added challenges. The second thing is fundamentally one way to think about what we're doing, and now I'm going to go a little in the weeds with the technology, is hydrogen is this energy powerhouse. And so if you're going to make a fuel, you're somehow starting with hydrogen. But hydrogen, as you know, is explosive, is hard to handle. It's famously leaks out of everything. You cannot contain it for very long before it starts to leak. So methanol is this really interesting opportunity from a chemical engineering point of view. Methanol is you're just hooking hydrogen onto CO2. It's the simplest possible way to move hydrogen around without having a dangerous, hard to contain fuel. Methanol is sort of the same, it's just like gasoline or ethanol. It certainly can be dangerous, but it's not something that's hard to manage. You can put it in a big tanker car on a train. You can put it in a fuel tank for a ship, all straightforward. So, they taught, so we're, okay, here's the point of all that. To make hydrogen, you need a lot of power. And basically you do it by splitting water into oxygen and hydrogen. So if you ever were in school and you put a battery, two wires from a battery into water, and You have little bubbles come off the end of that's how you make one of those bubbles is oxygen, one is hydrogen. You're just splitting the water into its components. We do that at a huge scale because you need a lot of hydrogen and you need to get a lot of power to do that. And if you want it to be low carbon, it needs to be renewable power. So one of the advantages of our technology is you can run it only when renewable power is cheap, because you can turn it on and off. As it's small and modular, you can turn the process on and off. But still, the cost of the electricity is our most expensive component. And so, particularly with data centers trying to nail down every electron they can, that is an additional challenge. We have to analyze each ethanol plant we're working with is where is there renewable power now? Where could we build more renewable power? What's the best way to approach that problem at this location?
Sally, would you like to add anything?
No, I think it's well covered.
Yes, I think it's a good level of details, okay? Because I'm not technical, but you provided really good explanations. So, when you talk to ethanol plant management or getting the information, so where do people get confused when they first hear about CapCO2?
You know, I don't actually think they get confused. I think they get worried. So first of all, we have a couple of ethanol plants now who've signed on. They want to be plant 2 and plant 3. And it's worth a shout out to Agra Energy in Laverne, Minnesota as being plant 1. So, so anyway, so we have ethanol plants coming on board. Yeah, particularly with some of the challenges of people who want to build pipelines and there's enormous pushback to that. But anyway, so the they love the idea. They're nervous about, do I want to be number 1? Do I want to be number 2? Do I want to be number 10? So that is every time we put something in place that makes it more real and it makes it easier to attract their attention.
They
Okay.
want to be able to come kick the tires, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
We are going to have the party of all parties
Yeah.
where they can come smell the methanol and like that. Yeah.
I don't see any downsides as downside of having CapCO2 next to the ethanol plant. So and giving that another life to CO2. Is there any I don't know, a bad, not bad press, a bad communication or bad something coming like, ooh, I'm not sure if we do that, it it might go other way.
What would you say, Sally?
I would say that the biggest concern that we encounter is the access to renewable power and how that lines up with what we're working on. So the access to the renewable power is the biggest concern that I hear in my work, and that's just one of those things. As things continue to develop, we talk about the chicken and the egg frequently in our staff meetings, but just continuing to share that this is an option. We for CO2 utilization and the ability to scale up our work is becoming more and more attractive as more facilities, look at these opportunities.
Yeah, and one other thing that people really like, so I'll shift to that, is we're not a couple of 100 million to prove it out. So 25 million will have a working plant. Most of the equipment is already off the shelf, but we'll have demonstrated the one new piece of equipment working and exactly the parameters of how it works. So for people who've been involved in green fuel projects, we're like a revelation, like 25 million, really? That's all? So, yeah.
Oh no, that's fantastic because yeah, this is so new and untouched, but the impact you're making really significant in changing, I think, economy even. So, Sally, in our pre-call that we had, there was a phrase I really liked it. It was advancing technology for the next generation of biofuels. What does the next generation of biofuels look like to you?
So with that, we talk a lot about from field to fleet to flight. So having these marine fuels that are available made from corn, and then having those precursors for SAF. Those are the things that we really focus on and see an opportunity with.
So, Jeff, if CapCO2 succeeds at the level you envision, what changes for the ethanol plants and rural communities?
Well, they'll be making more product. They'll be buying more corn. The whatever they can do at their plant to reduce the carbon footprint of their plant makes their ethanol that much more valuable. So it sort of pushes things in the right direction. What I would consider the right direction. It creates a profit incentive for lowering the carbon footprint, um, which is by far the best way to do it. Um, and
Absolutely.
uh, and again, these ethanol plants are there's huge untapped potential, for making next generation plastics, for cosmetics. Methanol is an important component of cosmetics and skincare um, uh, stuff. And so there's just all kinds of markets that are available that methanol plants wouldn't even touch nowadays. But oh, here's a place that we can be providing an important commodity that to make all these different products. So it just makes the methanol business more profitable, more interesting. Um, and again, that is a very low um, footprint for doing it at ethanol plants. There's straightforward ways to keep those clean, non-polluting, and nothing but a value add to their community. So that's what excites me.
Sally?
I would again echo what Jeff said. These are exciting opportunities. As a person born and raised in the Midwest, it's neat to see that these opportunities are in our backyard, and we can be putting something that we thought was a problem, as it was laid out earlier in the conversation, into a resource, and seeing how CO2 can be used to produce e-methanol.
So I have this is my favorite question, and so if you had a magic wand and could remove one bottleneck that will help cap CO2 broader industry move faster, what would you remove?
Well, I don't know if you're going to like the answer is fully fund the plan. So not do that step by step, but just have, for example, have a shipping company and come in and say, well, if you guarantee us all the methanol from your first plant, we'll fund the plant. So, and they're being cautious too, is, that, okay, well, we want to see a little bit of methanol first, and then that'll allow. So anyway, so that if we could kind of cut through that chicken and egg, being very cautious, and just sign on a big player, that would be a breakthrough.
So is it how far are we from this? I'm sure it's almost there.
We expect to be producing by middle of 2027.
Wow, it's really going then. That's great. Sally, would you like to add anything on that?
It's just exciting, looking ahead at what we have going, the conversations and communications that we have with different entities right now, and seeing that framework, that groundwork being laid for the next year or so. And we're excited. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, we'll have a big party when we're producing the e-methanol, and we'll be inviting people to come kick the tires.
Where are you based, Jolanta?
In Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay, well, quick flight up to the Twin Cities and a 3-hour drive to Laverne. Actually, Sioux Falls would be the place to go.
I'm coming.
Okay, great. Okay, you will get an invite.
Perfect. No, seriously, that would be great. And I would love to see with my eyes, because I'm sure it is incredible.
That's an ethanol plant behind me. So
Oh,
that's
really?
actually the Laverne ethanol plant. So I'm standing in front of a photograph of that.
Okay, I was thinking. Okay. Now that makes sense. I have a last question. So, what is the one message you want ethanol producers, farmers, renewable fuel partners, or rural communities to take away from this conversation?
If you're looking for your future fuel solution, CapCO2 Solutions is who they need to be talking to.
Jeff, would you like to add anything?
Nope, that's perfect.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jeff and Sally, to join me today and sharing your perspective on the future biofuels, recycled carbon, e-methanol, ethanol plants, innovation, and how new technologies can create stronger opportunities for farmers, rural communities, and the renewable fuel industry. Thank you again, Jeff and Sally. It was a pleasure having you.